Welcome to Run to the Hills Countdown to the Spine with Stephen Brown. I'm John Kynaston, and this is episode 5 of our little series. So, Stephen, it's now Sunday, the 13th of December, which means the race is 4 weeks away. So each week in these episodes, we've been trying to get a feel of how your training's going. And also we're looking at a different topic each time. So this episode, you're going to share your wisdom with us on the sort of mental strategies of the race. But to start with, if you can just tell us how's the last 2 weeks going in your training and preparation for next year's race?
Well, for anybody who's been watching it, I'm afraid it's the same old. I've been having this problem with my calf, which has meant I haven't been able to get out running, and also I've been working away quite a lot, which has affected my training. I've kept up doing the big sets of squats to try and build up a bit of leg muscle. I still haven't been out running since the last talk, and then unfortunately, one of my children has just been diagnosed with coronavirus. They're absolutely fine. They're not unwell, but as a result, we're all self-isolating for the next 2 weeks. So even if I was feeling fit enough to run, I'm not allowed out the front door at the minute. So I'm reduced to going up and down the stairs as my training for the spine at the minute.
Yeah. Have you got a big garden? Can you run round and round your garden?
Do you know, in the first lockdown, I measured the distance from my back garden to my front gate is 0.05 of a mile, and I worked out how many thousand times I needed to do that in order to do a 10-mile run, but I haven't resorted to that yet. So I'm sticking with the stairs and some squats.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, Stephen, I think this episode, I'd be really keen to crack on with the mental strategies, because I think you've got a lot to share on that. And I think that would be the sort of most helpful. And since you haven't been running, we can't talk about your runs anyway. But maybe we could just find out your weight, because that was one thing that we've been asking you each time. So last time I was very impressed that you were 11 stone 13. So you dipped under 12 stone. So are you still going down, or have you sort of stayed where you were?
I was 11, 12 yesterday when I weighed myself in the morning. So not as much progress as I'd hoped to make over 2 weeks. But yeah, I'm still roughly going in the right direction. The tricky bit is going to be now, because after this week I'm then off for Christmas. My eldest daughter's coming back from university. We're looking forward to Christmas dinner. So that's going to be the tough time of year to actually keep the weight in bounds. But I've got hopes.
Yeah. And as well, Stephen, I think if you're not running as much, then it's also hard, isn't it? If you're doing 40, 50 miles a week and you're looking after your diet, then it's quite, fairly, the weight comes off a little bit, doesn't it? Whereas if you're not able to run as much, it's a bit harder, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Even simple things like walking to work at the minute. I'm mainly working at home, or even if I'm away, I'm then stuck in one location all the time. So the daily exercise I would have usually got of walking to and from my office is all gone at the minute. So yeah, it is a bit harder in that regard. Yeah.
Now, I know a number of people have been watching these little episodes and have enjoyed the different contribution that you've been sharing. And I think each topic I think is interesting, but I think this one for me, that the one we're going to chat about, mental strategies, is a key one. I interviewed Mike Churchyard on Thursday. We do a monthly live interview with Run to the Hills, and it was great chatting to Mike. And there was a number of great questions, and one of them was on the mental strategy side. And Mike said that he went along to one of the training weekends in 2019, obviously before the race. And you were speaking, and one of the things that you talked about was mental strategies. And he gave a lot of credit to you, Stephen. He said he took on board all the things that you said, and it made a massive difference to him in the race. So I know that you've, and having run with you and chatted with you, I know it's something that you've thought through quite a bit. So I was quite keen if we look at maybe 4 areas of mental strategy. And the first one, we could think about what you're doing now before the race. So what is your mental preparation for the spine race?
Okay, well, the things that you can do now, and I am doing now, one of them is the sort of the rules of engagement, if you like. You can prepare now what your own personal rules are going to be for a race like the spine. So I can remember the very first year that I did the West Highland Way, I came up with a rule or a mantra, if you like, which was that as long as I was physically capable of moving and the race directors hadn't told me that I was timed out, then I was going to keep going. And that was my rule, and that's actually a rule I've stuck to in every ultramarathon I've ever done since. The great thing about that rule is that it takes all of the decision making out of your hands during the race. The only thing you've got to decide is whether you're actually physically capable of still moving, and as long as you are, and you've already set the rule that you've got to keep going. I can remember you and I did the Dragons back last year. On day 2, I was really close to dropping out of that race, and suddenly what rescued me was remembering that that's my rule. So I don't have permission to DNF this race because I'm still physically capable of moving. So I've got to keep going. And actually, that takes a lot of pressure off of you in the race. You stop worrying about whether you're going to DNF or not. You just, well, I've just got to keep going until I'm timed out. So you can come up with some rules and mantras, things which you're going to say to yourself in a race. For something like the Spine, which is a multi-day race where you're going to be going through sort of consecutive nights, I think another big thing of mental prep you can do is visualization of different scenarios you're going to be in. Hopefully by this point you'll have done some training, ideally at night time, and ideally in circumstances like the Pennine Way, if not the Pennine Way itself. So picture yourself in the middle of that bog at 3 o'clock in the morning when you've just fallen over on your face and you're so, you're wet. Think through what do I do in that scenario? What is my drill? Get up, get onto a bit of dry ground, check if you've dropped anything. What do I need to do now? Am I cold? Do I need to sort of push on, eat something sugary? So think through different scenarios that you might find yourself in and begin to work out your process for dealing with those. So those are 2 things that you can be doing in advance, and that I will be doing between now and race day.
That's again, that's really helpful, because I think that they, if people are out there, if the people who are able to be out on the trail and running, they might be on their own for several hours, and it's those sort of things you can do, can't you? You can spend that time on a run thinking about what if, what will I do if this happens? And the more you do that, the more it helps you to be ready if it does happen on the day, doesn't it?
Yeah. Or, I mean, if you're going out for a nighttime run, something I've done is just stop for half an hour and just go through the drill. I've taken out my full sleep kit, setting it up, getting in, getting straight out and packing it all back up again. It's not because I'm actually going to sleep out during that training run, but it's just for the drill of where does each piece of kit go? How do I get it out? What's the order? And what's the order that I pack it all back up again? And you don't want to be doing stuff like that for the first time on day 3 in a race when you're tired and confused. These are all drills that you can practice well in advance of a race.
Yeah. Okay. So that's thinking about things we can do now. And then have you got like a mental strategy for on the start line of what you were hoping to where you're hoping to be on the start line mentally?
Yes. The thing I find really interesting about multi-day races is the longer a race is in terms of time and distance, the more it's about mental strategy than almost physical strategy. So the way I think about it is this: on the start line, I visualize myself as having 4 different bank accounts, if you like, that I'm in charge of. And I think of those as, so number 1 is my nutrition hydration bank account. Number 2 is my sleep exhaustion bank account. Number 3 is my pain and discomfort bank account. And number 4 is what I think of as my sort of emotional or hormonal bank account. And these 4 things, the fascinating stuff about a long race is you don't know how much you've got in each of those bank accounts on day 1, because you can't go to the pin machine and check your balance. But number 2, you don't know how much it's going to cost you to get to the end of the race out of each of those bank accounts. But my strategy for the start line is to make sure that as far as possible, each one of those bank accounts is as much in credit as possible. So, I want to be fully hydrated. I've had something sensible and nourishing to eat in the morning, which is going to be like slow release carbs. I want to be as rested as possible. I want to be as pain-free and injury-free as possible, which is why for a race like this, a much, much longer taper than you might think is going to be useful, because you're going to minimize your chances of a last-minute niggle. And in terms of the emotional hormonal, which is sounds slightly I don't know, airy fairy perhaps, but that's the one I'm actually most interested in. For me, that's about managing my stress levels and my adrenaline levels, trying to keep those within check for the race. So that's how I think about it, for what it's worth, and that's what I'm trying to get to the start line with those 4 things as in control and maximized as possible.
Yeah, I love that. I've not heard you speak about that before. I think that idea, and it gives you a clear little picture in your head, doesn't it, of those bank accounts and making sure that they're topped up.
Yeah, and my strategy throughout the race is at all times to be thinking through those 4 things. So I have a sort of my own theory of endurance. I like thinking about these things. I spend a lot of time out there thinking about them. For endurance is a consecutive series of decisions not to give up. So between Edale and Kirkyatom, what you need to do is to make probably 10,000 consecutive decisions that you're not going to give up. The fascinating thing about human nature is that your decision making is massively affected by the environment and circumstances you're in. So we all know as humans that when you're tired, angry, hungry, depressed, you make bad decisions or different decisions to the ones you make when you're in a good frame of mind. You're a decision to give up in a race like the Spine, you're much more likely to decide to give up when you're in a bad place. So my mental strategy is at all times to think through those 4 bank accounts. What can I do to top these up? I'm feeling really low now. I don't really fancy carrying on with this race. Right, let's think about this. Do I need some food and drink? Am I tired? Do I need to stop and have a rest? Am I in pain? Do I need to take some painkillers? Am I in discomfort? Is there something chafing? Am I getting stressed or too excited? Do I need to try and control my emotions? And so by thinking back through those 4 things, I then make the environment in which I'm making my decision about whether I carry on or give up a more positive environment. So I'm much less likely to give up, if that makes any sense.
No, it does, very much so. Yeah, and I think I love that idea of all those little decisions. It's like the the thing about all the little things that we do make up the whole, don't they? And if you get as many little decisions right, then you've got more chance of succeeding, haven't you? Okay, so we've thought about what your aim is, and you have those 4 bank accounts nice and full and ready to be cashed in. So just tell us your thoughts about your emotional control during the race, because as we all know, we go through highs and lows. So what is your mental strategy to keep control of your emotions?
Well, my thinking on this really developed from a conversation I had with you a couple of years ago when you were telling me about, I think it was an Australian runner who was talking about bonking during races. Bonking is a word that ultra runners use, which means something different than it does in everyday use. But bonking is when you have that massive emotional crash and you're a real low. And the theory you were telling me about from this Australian runner is that when you're at that real low point, what you can't do is get straight back to a high point. You have to go through the neutral middle point first. So you sort of try and work your way back up to that neutral point, and then you'll eventually get back up to feeling sort of more positive. But my development of that thought was, well, what if I tried never to leave that very narrow middle section of neutrality? So I never get down to the lows, but also I never allow myself to go up to that real elated high. And you can't always control that, but for me, the 2 big emotions that are in play, or 2 big sort of hormones, if you like, that are in play in an endurance event are stress levels and adrenaline levels. So I try to do everything I can to control my stress, and a lot of that's to do with sort of planning and the types of things that we've talked about over previous weeks, so that I'm in control of stuff. But also the adrenaline side of it, I try not to let myself get too excited, because if you get to that real high point of, oh, this is fantastic, I'm absolutely elated, you can be sure that there is a come down from that. There is always a, you know, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So I try not to let myself get too excited. And if I feel that happening, I'll try and take myself into a very neutral place. I'll try and just think about something fairly bland or routine. I'll think through my favorite football players, because football is something that I enjoy watching. But to think about it doesn't actually take up that much mental energy. So it just takes my mind off of the race and stops me getting too excited. So I'm just trying to keep my emotions in a certain amount of check. And I find that what that means is I very rarely these days get that massive crash in a race. And well, it works for me. That's what I'm trying to do through the race.
Yeah. The Australian coach, his name is Andy Du Bois. And
right.
Yeah, he was great. He really helped me when I interviewed him for a West Highland Way Race podcast one time. And that was the thing. And it's stuck with me ever since. And I know the Dragon's Back for me was the longest race I've ever done, you know, sort of 5 days. And it really helped me to try and have that idea of avoiding the highs so you avoid the lows. And it does. I would recommend that fully from what you've said there, back that up, because I think that and the longer the race is, the more important it is, I think, which is true for most of the things you've been talking about.
Well, yeah, and over the course of 5 or 6 days, stress can actually make you physically unwell. I mean, I get cold sores, and that's a stress reaction. I get those little like inflamed fingernails, and that's a stress reaction. And of course, over 24 to 36 hours, you can cope with that. But over 5 days, the incremental effect of having infected fingernails and a sore mouth, which maybe means that you're not eating as much as you should, it can all add up and have an almost catastrophic effect on your race. So the more you can control stress, you're not having a physical reaction to your own internal stress, the more you're maximizing your chance of getting to the end of the race.
I think those three areas that we looked at so far, ideally, it'd be great if the race just goes all according to plan and everything happens fine. But we both know that that probably won't happen. So have you got sort of mental strategy of coping with setbacks? I'm not wishing any setbacks on you, but most of us in a race this length will have some setbacks. So what's your strategy for that?
Well, I'd be even stronger than that. I would say it is absolutely inevitable over the course of a 270-mile race in the winter over multi-days that you will have a setback. It will happen. So the first thing is to prepare yourself for that to be normal. There will be setbacks in a race. But the way I tend to, I've got a number of strategies that I've built up, but a big one for me is to depersonalize it, or think of it in the third person. So I've got a number of ways I can do that. One of them is when I'm in that, I use this example again. I've fallen face over in a bog, and it's the fourth time it's happened that night, and I'm pulling myself back on. Can I really be bothered with this? Is to immediately try and visualize myself looking down on me, so that this is happening to that person there. And I'll talk about myself in the third person. Like, come on, Brownie, pick yourself up. You've been here before, you know what to do. And sort of stepping back from it means that you're less in that world of sort of pain and frustration in your own head. Another way which I sort of achieve the same effect is I might pretend that I'm with somebody like my wife or my mum, even, who is sort of now well into her 70s, and I've got a 5-mile stretch to do that I know is really tough. Let's talk. Let's pretend that I've got to get my mum to the other side of this section, and that each step of the way I'm going to talk my mum through it. So right, we'll look ahead. Look, you can see that post up there. It's 50 yards away. Let's concentrate on getting to that post first of all. Mum, I'll say over my shoulder in my head. If you ever come across me in the spine and I'm talking to this imaginary mum, you'll know why now. But and it's sort of describing, right, well, look, we can see that there's some boggy ground there. We're going to need to be careful about that. Let's just be very careful getting around that. And then look, there's some tussocky grass there. You could trip in that. Just be careful of your ankles in there. Right, we're up that post. Okay, the next section is that there's a gate over there. We've got to get to that. And you sort of, you talk yourself through it. And somehow for me, that process of taking, as if I'm sort of more worried about somebody else's welfare than my own, takes my mind off of my own discomfort, my own stress, but also it's very good for focusing, because you are actually looking ahead and thinking, well, that's a potential hazard there. Let's be very careful when we're going around that bit, and let's just focus on the next place we need to get to. And it's a way of sort of breaking down a tricky section. So that's a technique that I use that has worked for me to help me sort of get through some of the low spots. But there will be adversity.
Yeah, I remember you shared that with me. I think it was before the Dragon's Back. So I remember using that during the Dragon's Back, and I would back that up. I found that quite helpful. It's quite it's not something you do all the time, is it? But I found there were certain times when, as you said, you feel a bit low. There's something's happened, and just trying to take you out of it. It's I would certainly recommend people have a go with that, because that really helped. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, the reality is a lot of people in the Race Like the Spine will end up doing the race with somebody else, and that can achieve the same effect. When you're with somebody else. Just chatting can take your mind off of things. I quite like sort of racing by myself and being in my own world, so I have to sort of develop these techniques. But inevitably I'll spend hours or days with somebody who I've met along the trail, and that also can be really helpful. Just chatting to somebody, then you're not actually thinking about your own sort of circumstances and your own discomfort.
Yeah. Another tip, which I think sort of falls in with this one as well, is something that you said to me about making sure if you think about something, you do it straight away.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my sort of absolute race rules now, is I call it, when the thought occurs, deal with it. And the example I always use, because this has happened to most people, is you're running along and you begin to feel cold and you think, I need to put another layer on. And it's the gap between that initial thought and the 25 minutes later when you actually stop, take your running vest off and put a warmer layer on and then start running again. And it's the 25 minutes of, this is stupid, I'm getting cold, I should stop. I don't really want to stop at the minute. I'll just carry on till I find a more convenient place. This is stupid, I should stop. I don't really want to stop. And you just go round and round in that circle. We've all been there. And so my rule now is, as soon as the thought occurs, I'm beginning to get cold, I stop and deal with it then. Or if the thought occurs, I'm beginning to get hungry, I'll stop and eat then. And it takes out that, it deals with a lot of wasted time worrying about stuff, but also in that 25 minutes where you're thinking, this is stupid, I ought to stop and put another layer on, you're getting colder. And you're not thinking about the fact that you've maybe got a bit of chafing up here, because all you're focused on is the fact that you're beginning to get cold. So you're putting yourself into a worse and worse decision-making place. And that can, over the course of a long race, that can become very dangerous almost. So it simplifies a lot of things for me to have this rule that when the thought occurs, I deal with it there and then.
I must confess to you, Stephen, we've talked about this, and that's something which is one of my rules as well, but I ignored it in the Hardmoors 55 a couple of months ago. And just after Osmotherley, with about 20 miles to go, I was running with Andy and Sarah, and they were a bit ahead, and I caught up with them, and they'd stopped to put warmer clothes on, and they were ready to go. So instead of stopping, which I should have done, and put some warm clothes on, I thought, oh, I'll be okay. And it was 40 minutes later by the time I stopped, and it did. It was a painful lesson, and again, just because you know these things, you've still got to do them, haven't you?
Yeah, you do, and that becomes an added complication and dynamic if you are running with somebody else, because then, of course, out of sort of social politeness and embarrassment, you want to be at their pace. So for me, one of the reasons I like to be by myself a lot of the time is so that I don't have that dynamic. But if you are with somebody else, then you need to be very disciplined about the fact that, okay, I'm cold and this is my race. So you say that you just carry on. I might catch up in a bit, but I need to stop and put this on. Certainly for me, when I'm with somebody else, then I need to be very, very disciplined about the fact that, the rule still is, when the thought occurs to me, I will deal with it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Okay, so that's been really helpful. We looked at those 4 areas, and I'm sure, with a race like the Spine, those mental strategies are going to really help people. So thank you so much. Now, at the end of each of our episodes, we've been just finding out where you're out on a scale of 1 to 10 on the physical and the mental. So last 2 weeks ago, you were 5 out of 10 for the physical. So have you been able to move at all on that one, or are you feeling similar?
Go on. Let's make it a 5.5. This time I can't claim a full point, but let's make it 5.5. I've been doing some sort of very I've been doing these big sets of squats, and I can feel a difference in my leg muscles. So let's give myself an extra half point on that.
Okay. And thankfully, as you've been saying, this race is more about the mental side, and you were up to 9 out of 10 2 weeks ago. So you're still similar?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick on a 9 for that. I want to leave myself a little bit of wriggle room for just before the start of the race. So let's stick on a 9 for that.
Yeah. Now, we've been doing these every 2 weeks, Stephen. So 2 weeks with time would be the 26th of December. So we're going to put it back a week, aren't we? Because we're both probably busy with family on on Boxing Day. So we'll do.
And I'll be 13. I'll be 13.5 stone on Boxing Day as well. So I don't want you asking me my weight.
So we'll meet on the 3rd of January, which will be just a week before the race. So we'll do the last one. And what we thought we'd do is, if anyone's got any questions, any things that they'd like us to cover on that last episode, so I'll put something out on our Facebook page, and if you can share that on the Spine group as well. So if anyone's got a particular question they'd like to ask Stephen, then feel free to leave a comment, and we'll try and get round to those, ask those on that final episode. But I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a good isolation time with your family over the next 10 days or so, and everyone's safe and well. And I look forward to chatting to you after Christmas.
Brilliant. Look forward to it.